A secret no one knew quietly emerged years later. In the depths of an old drawer, among yellowed papers, that letter stood there, unsent, unread, as if time itself had forgotten it. In the evening, as the sun left its last rays, I visited that house, the house where my grandmother once lived, now standing empty. When I opened the door, the light seeping inside gave a faint shimmer to the dusty floor. The air was still, silent. Only the wind gently rattling the old window frames could be heard. When I stepped into the living room, I paused for a moment. Everything stood as it was. Her armchair, her table, the old clock on the wall. But something was missing. Perhaps time itself was missing. Those days, those sounds, those scents, they had all remained in the distance, in an untouchable past. I went upstairs. The wooden stairs quietly groaned with each step. Upstairs, I entered my grandmother's bedroom. The room was small but peaceful. Moonlight filtered through the window. A gentle breeze swayed the curtains. In the center of the room stood an old wardrobe. When I opened its doors, the scent of mothballs reached my nose. Inside, neatly folded sheets, old photographs, and a few boxes. But I haven't told you the most important part yet. In the bottom drawer, there was a small chest. It was wooden, covered with delicate carvings. I slowly opened it with my hands. Inside, a few photographs, a silver watch, and a letter. The envelope was yellowed, its edges worn. There was no address on it. Only a name was written. Elena. I took the letter in my hand. The paper was very delicate, as if it would crumble the moment I touched it. I slowly pulled it from the envelope. The paper inside was filled with fine handwriting. The ink had faded somewhat, but was still readable. I began to read. "Dear Elena," it began. I don't know how many times I've written this letter, how many times I wrote it and tore it up, how many times I poured onto paper what I wanted to tell you, and then lost my courage. The lines continued. Each word carried weight, regret. The person writing was trying to reach someone they loved but could never quite manage it. Perhaps they never wanted to send this letter at all. Perhaps just writing, pouring those feelings onto paper, was enough. Moonlight filled the room more. The light filtering through the edge of the curtain fell upon the letter. In that moment, it was as if time stopped. As if the person who wrote that letter was sitting here, beside me. I felt as though I could hear their voice. A slow, calm, melancholic voice. "I was going to tell you everything that day," the letter continued. "But the words knotted in my throat. When I saw you, when I looked into your eyes, I forgot what to say. You were smiling, and I was carrying a storm inside. As I read the letter, I found myself within that moment. As if I too was there, the silent witness to that conversation. Two people, close to each other yet actually so far apart. Unspoken words, unshared feelings. Can you imagine yourself in this silence too? Perhaps you also have something you've never said in your life. Perhaps you too will one day, somewhere, find a letter someone wrote to you but never sent. Perhaps that letter will open a door for you, to the past, to a forgotten time. I continued reading the letter. Years passed, it said. You left, I stayed. This city feels foreign to me now. Every street, every corner reminds me of you. When I wake up in the mornings, my first thought is always you. I wonder where you are. I wonder if you're happy. I wonder if you ever think of me. The wind grew a bit stronger. A cool air entered through the window. The candle flame flickered but didn't go out. That light created faint shadows on the walls of the room, as if those shadows were ghosts of the past, silently dancing, disappearing and reappearing. I reached the final part of the letter. "Perhaps one day I'll send you this letter," it concluded. "Perhaps one day I'll gather my courage, knock on your door, look at your face, and tell you everything. But for now, these words will remain here. On this paper, in this silence, in this waiting." There was no signature, just an empty line, as if the person writing couldn't even muster the courage to write their name. I slowly put the letter back in the envelope. I closed the chest. I pushed the drawer shut. But those words were still echoing in my mind. That feeling, that regret, that silence. Before leaving the room, I looked around once more. Moonlight still filtered through the window. The room was peaceful, calm, as if that letter had been hidden here for years. And now, finally, it had quietly told its story. But who would learn the real truth? Who was Elena? Who wrote the letter? Why was it never sent? These questions would now stay with me. Perhaps I would never find the answers. Perhaps this is how some stories should end. Unanswered, open-ended, silent. I went downstairs. Before leaving through the door, I looked back once more. The house was slowly fading into darkness. But that letter, those words, that feeling, they were all coming with me. Perhaps this is why some stories never end. They are simply carried from one person to another, from one generation to another. The night had grown completely dark. The streets were empty. As I walked, my footsteps filled the silence. At one point, I stopped and looked up at the sky. The stars were shining. The moon was directly overhead. Everything was so calm, so peaceful, as if the universe was respecting the silence of that letter. That night, when I returned home, I couldn't sleep for a long time. Those words kept turning in my mind. "Dear Elena, how many times I wrote and tore it up. When I saw you, I forgot what to say." Perhaps we all have an unsent letter inside us. Perhaps we all have something, somewhere, that we couldn't say to someone. And perhaps these words will remain in silence forever. But this silence is perhaps the most beautiful story, because some things are more powerful when left unsaid. Some feelings are deeper when unshared. And some letters unsent, hidden in a drawer for years, quietly but very powerfully, continue to exist. That letter is now back in the drawer, but it's no longer alone, because I read it. I know its story. And perhaps one day, you too will find such a letter. Perhaps you too, in a forgotten drawer, among yellowed papers, will discover a secret waiting quietly. And then you will understand. Some stories exist not to be told, but simply to be. Close your eyes, breathe. Peacefully think of that old house's silence, the paper of that letter, the smell of the ink, the weight of the words. And slowly let sleep come to you, quietly, peacefully, carrying the mystery of that lost letter in your dreams. Good night.